So thank you, ladies, for the powerful stories that you shared with us, the ministries that you're doing. And you have a lot in common, and these themes that one theme that stuck out to me was that, and this is an ongoing theme, is the theme of the gathering we have here, which is ministry in the time of chaos, or ministry in troubled times. But really, isn't most ministry calling us into chaos? A lot of ministry we do. So you both have said yes to that. And in that moment, Peggy, you mentioned that it's where we're in the places of deep despair where we find hope. It's in the places where there is this place of death where new life happens. So this is, to us as Christians, can sound very romantic in a way. Say, yes, let me go do it. It sounds incredible. Send me into the prisons, right? Send me out there to be the community organizer. Send me to be with those kids. But then the reality sets in. The true challenges of what it really means to be following God's mission, God's call. Can you talk about where you have found the strength and how your faith has led you through the troubled waters? Because you're right in the thick of it.
I find it in the companionship of others who share the journey.
Hold on.
Find it in the companionship of those who go. I never quite understood Jesus' story about sending people out in mission 2 by 2. I find strength there, and part of our ministry model is we go into the prison as a group. There may be 20 of us that go, but we disperse into different groups often, and this idea of going 2 by 2 is important for a variety of security reasons, but it's also important because we hold each other. So that's part of it. The other part of it, for me, actually, is the support that we get from the people to whom we go to visit. Every time we leave that place, they never forget to pray for us. And one of their prayers is that we will arrive home safely. Well, the prison is a remote place. Those who come up from New Orleans spend about 2.5 to 3 hours getting there one way. And so there's a long journey through bad roads on nighttime, and I can't tell you how many times I've missed hitting a deer on that road coming home. So I get it from other people who pray for me and support what I do.
Of course, I think always having companions in that long journey is absolutely necessary. But something that has always helped me is reflecting on the people who helped me get to where I am now, and me wanting and me knowing that if I can just be that person to someone else, I am doing something in this big scope of things. So for example, young adults are hurt by the church, especially young adults of color. They're really hurt by this church, and especially young adults in the LGBTQ community. If I can just be a person that can give them the opportunities that I got, such as leading camp or going to Missional Voices when I did 3 years ago and things like that, and I can give them that little empowerment back, that you have that leadership within yourself too. And no matter if somebody said, hush, you're too young, or hush, you don't say anything in this church, or whatever it may be, I think that's one of the most, I think that keeps pushing me. Even when I'm really scared and I don't know what's next or anything like that, I remember what Sandra Montes or my dad or Arlene has told me in my life, where they're just like, girl, you got this. Here, just go to this conference, or here, let's sit down and read this scripture, or here, let's just develop this thought a little more. And I was calm, and I want to just the thought of being able to do that for another person really gets me through the hardest parts.
Yeah, you got to have your team, right? You got to have this love team that's there, your Sandra Monteses, who will be there to support you during this time, because when God's calling you into the mission, you're in the midst of the troubled waters, and both you ladies know that. you are holding the hands and being with folks who are experiencing lifelong incarceration, who are and we're dealing with a system that is not on their side for them to exit. So you have to have this good network, this family to love you and support you and strengthen you. So you both also are dealing with populations. You've mentioned this in both your talks, and we've heard this throughout the other presenters as well. How God's mission, and when we are part of God's mission, there is a restoration of identity and of dignity that this world can rob us of. And God calls us and says, no, I want you right there to be the voice for the voiceless, to provide hope for those who are in the midst of despair. So what has that been like to be a part of responding to God's movement of restoring dignity and hope to people? Is it ever... I've got a bird who's chirping on this too. Has it ever been challenging or overwhelming, saying, how can I, as a missioner or being part of God's mission, be that person who helps restore the dignity? Or have you been able to just say, God, do what you do, and just let me be in the midst of it?
Well, I do believe it is God who is restoring people's sense of dignity as God's Spirit works in the lives of individual people. But I think how we help that along is to be an active listener of stories. You listen to the stories of people with whom you join in communion. You, to the extent that you can, you tell those stories to others, particularly in the area of criminal justice reform and that type of thing. Most people in our society just kind of forget that people are living in prison. If you're not have not been affected by crime or in any way, you just don't think. It's just not part of your daily routine to think about people who are living in prison. And so being able to tell the stories of those who experience that life help. But the biggest help is when they are given an opportunity to tell their own.
Right.
Because I can never tell theirs. They can tell it.
Absolutely.
I think I'd be lying if I don't say it's overwhelming. I mean, it's very intimidating to you sit in a place where, for whatever reason, that person thinks they can never accomplish that, or they can never reach that, or they can never even imagine that, especially if they're undocumented or a person of color. And to have just a piece of giving that back, but at the same time receiving some of that, I mean, it's a very, I don't even know how to describe the feeling. The times that I've been able, for example, at the cathedral, I help lead VBS, and we never do it in the actual cathedral. We always go to the homes of the Latinos that welcome us to their homes. And again, it's always like, Maria or Padre Simon, are you sure? Like, my house is not pretty, or my house, it has whatever, or it's in this area. And to just be like, oh no, this is a great area. We'll have fun. The kids will have fun. That's the biggest thing. And you see, it was just a simple statement, but you see that this quick change of, wow, okay, well, if you said this, and that's the part that scares me. What is that you said this? When they, like, you know, like they put so much pressure on, well, since the father said this, or because the father's daughter said this, when they are so capable themselves. So I guess for me, it's yes, I want to be able to say, God, help me, and, you know, I let go, and you're in charge of this. But also, it is overwhelming because you want to be able to be like, but you have that too. I shouldn't, I'm not really teaching it to you because, or I'm not giving it to you, or I'm not showing this to you because you had it all along.
You're just revealing.
Yeah, so it's like, what do you mean? You know, it's a very confusing time because you want to be grateful, and I am grateful that I'm in that time with that person, but at the same time, it's very heartbreaking that that person didn't know that their whole lives, or
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's comforting to know that they're already made, that everyone's made in God's image, and everyone's made with God's love, and you're not the person who has to be the teacher or the former. So God is, you're just helping reveal what is already true.
Exactly.
What is already there.
It's already there.
And maybe this world has stripped it away through whatever, yeah, incomplete systems that we have, but you get to be a part of this movement,
Right.
this mission.
And that's the humbling part.
Yes.
And knowing that God is in the midst of that, and there is going to, I mean, God already loves that and knows that person deeply, and it's just getting them to see that and getting it revealed is the most beautiful part.
So let me ask you a question. You both have a very clear, everyone who's come up on the stage today has had a very clear mindset of saying, I feel this is my calling, this is my mission, I'm called to this community, I've heard the needs, I'm responding to needs. You sang a song about this today, and it's from everyone, has been, Cameron goes out to Ecuador, everyone's got this drive, and it seems like it gets you out of bed, right? These are the people who serve, full of it, of God's love. When do you find yourself getting in the way of God's call for you? When do you feel yourself, what is the stumbling block that can happen to all of us in our missional call? Or perhaps that you see in others, but if you want us to tell personally.
What gets in the way is, I think, something we talked about yesterday afternoon, is thinking that you know the answer before you've asked the question. That's the biggest temptation. That just because ministry that was conducted a certain way yesterday with a particular group of inmates is going to be sort of the way that that's going to work the next time. So I think that getting in the way is when we figure out, we think we've got the answers and forget to ask the question.
Yeah. I think when I look back in moments where I've got myself into trouble, it's just that. It's moments where I stop listening, and that's why I try to, really emphasize like listening, because it's so easy to just be there and be like, oh, I know how this story ends. You're just gonna tell me you can't meet, or you can't, you don't, because of your status, you can't do this. I got it, and then you stop listening, and you're just like, I know what to do, and that gets me into trouble because it's like, Maria, this person is not the same person that you met 2 weeks ago that had a similar situation. You don't know how this story ends. Stop, be in the moment, pray, listen, and that changes everything again. But it's always that time where you think, again, you have all the answers, and you're like, no, I got it, okay. And you're swearing to yourself, I'm listening to this person, but you're not. You're already thinking, so I shouldn't connect her with this person because she's probably going to say this, and it ends up being completely different, and then that. So just truly being in that moment, hearing that person. And I think for myself, I tend to do that when I'm uncomfortable and I kind of want to take myself from the situation, like it's too painful or it's too relative or it's too, powerful, the story. It's like, well, let me just remember how this other story ended and it was fine, and let me not be uncomfortable anymore. So it's just, again, pushing myself to be like, this isn't about you, boo. This is about God's plan in this world, and you're just an instrument to make that revelation.
Sure.
I think, too, it's important to never trivialize the pain into which these stories of hope and resurrection, from which they arise, and which never goes away. I mean, I think the tendency is to glorify some of this stuff, some of this work that we do, and think that it's all going to have a happy ending. Well, it doesn't necessarily have a happy ending in the sense that we want it to have.
And so our call is to go directly into the chaos.
Right.
Right?
And just be there.
And be there. You both have talked about just be there. Right. Not come in with a Messiah complex.
Exactly.
That I'm going to go rehabilitate a bunch of people, when actually it's your soul that might be rehabilitated, right? And that you're not going to go and save all these students. God's going to do that. You're just showing up to listen.
Yeah. Just something that made me think about that when I first, in the Diocese of Philadelphia, they have City Camp. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's this camp in the middle of North Philly, and I mean it's a very dangerous area, and these kids, they drop out as soon as they can, and they're home by themselves for countless hours, and this is how the story goes. And so I went there. It was a mission trip, and I went, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to sleep in tents. Like, I'm gonna get bitten alive. And I'm over there, and I'm gonna teach these kids. I mean, this is like 17-year-old me, but still pretty bad. It was like, I'm gonna teach these kids about Jesus' love, and I'm gonna teach them all these great VBS songs, and it's gonna be great. And I'm gonna teach them this, and I'm gonna teach them this, and I'm gonna teach them this.
Sound like a seminarian.
Oh,
I would say.
maybe. And at the end of that week, I mean, I might have taught them one thing, but they taught me a million more. It was like I went in with an agenda like this, kind of like Messiah, like, I am here to teach you all about Jesus' true love that obviously you must not know about. And then they taught me about true love. I mean, these kids were kids that you would try to hug them, and they would like scream because they just didn't understand what affection was. And then also made me realize and open my eyes to the things I took for granted. So yes, absolutely. Like you go to many of these things thinking, I'm here to change the world. God sent me. I said yes to the call. Yes, yeah. I am here to do whatever. And I can say that about every ministry I've been a part of and continue to be. You are always, I think you always give, of course, but the amount you receive is always the biggest part. And that's, I think, one of the most beautiful parts, the realization when you leave or in the middle of it, and you're like, oh, it was me. I was the one. God, you put me here for me too. Like, sure. I needed that. I needed to hear that. I needed to be here.
Yeah, no, it's a trap that for all of us, I think in the church, that we get caught up in the giving. That's what I need to do. Yeah. But we're losing a big part of the kingdom. And a big part of God's mission when we're not receiving what's being worked upon our souls and our hearts. Can you give an example in the prison where you're just in your presence of how much you've received, where God has been working on your heart in these most challenging of moments, where you're like, wow, this has really, really changed my heart?
Well, I think I've learned a lot about myself in this situation. Recognizing things in myself that I'm not sure that I would have ever recognized in any other sort of way. Sure. That's a very good answer to your question. But it's been a life-changing experience for me. Life-changing in the sense of what do I value and what is of value to me. I mean, I come out of a corporate background for many years when I was in the financial services industry. And so for many years of my life, I was thinking about value, money and efficiency and process and that kind of thing. And what I've learned to do is think about value in such a very different way as a result of my encounter with people who have nothing in the ways that the world thinks of as being valuable, yet have demonstrated a courage and a resiliency and an amazing amount of faith. Situations that I'm sure I don't know that I would have reacted the way that they did to their situations. And so,
yeah. So I want to open this up. There's these great themes of like the deeper we go into the chaos we've heard today, the more that God has the opportunity to really just transform us and transform communities by us not staying on the sidelines of the kingdom, but just getting right into it. And it's not easy. It's very, very challenging work. No one up here today has been like, this has just been a walk in the park. It's so glorious. It is challenging, but equally incredibly rewarding. So stories from you all that are in the midst of your own ministries, as we hear on this last set of speakers, that you all wish to share, or questions that you have for Peggy and Maria.
So when one is doing work in the community, you don't want to put your ego at the center, and you don't want to have kind of deficit language. And yet, deficit language is how you get money. How you get funding often for programs is to say, I have saved the poor children, or we have saved the blah, blah, blah. And so what are the things we can do or ways that we can shift language, not just for practitioners, but also for funders, so that we're all having the same conversation about empowerment, is what I was thinking about when you were talking.
That's a hard one because as a community organizer, you're always asking for grants. And so you have to be, you tend to be like, in Harvey, I helped this many underserved, and it's hard because you know what you're doing, especially if you're someone in that community, you know what you're doing. And you hate when other people do it, but you know that's the only way. But I don't think it is. I don't think it's the only way. I think one of the biggest things that I learned from Reverend Eileen O'Brien is that language matters so much, and just reconstructing that language. And so maybe the battle doesn't go all the way to the funders first, but starting with people in your own church, So when you have to do vestry reports or things like that, it's not so much about how did, I impact the lives of all these. Maybe say, this is what we did. And so that we changed our language about how we presented things in a smaller capacity. And I still haven't gotten to the big people, but I'm hoping that, it's because we're already changing this language and how it's being understood. It's not so much about how many poor Black kids did we help. It's about what did we do as Houston Canterbury or as TSMO, and then why would we need this money to further continue doing that great work, not necessarily, oh, look, we're saving all these people, and aren't you proud of us because nobody else is doing it? It's more than that, and I think that is really hard, and I don't know, I would just say go start small, because the language starts, you go to any church I've been to, and you go to listen to any vestry, and it's like, yeah, especially if there's a Spanish-speaking congregation, there's like, look what this person did. They helped this many low-income students help this, and it hurts when you hear it, and it hurts even more when you have to be the one writing the same thing.
Sure. Peggy, any thoughts on that?
I think it gets back to the issue of talking about value rather than money. We want to do this because we are grateful for the love God has shown to us, and we want to convey that value, that love to other people. So part of it is that. I think part of it is talking about joy, the joy that you receive as a person involved in this work, and the opportunities that you open for others to share it. So I think in terms of when you're doing grants and that type of thing, you're talking about value. And you're talking about commonly held Christian values if you're looking inside the church for money. And if you're looking outside the church for money, you're talking about societal values. You're talking about ways in which people who are divided from each other, who are separated from each other for whatever reason, don't like each other and are afraid of each other, can find a way to live in peace together. No, it's all male. Yes, and that's kind of a growing way in which our work is today. And we're learning about that and trying to figure it out, what it looks like. We're looking at, of course, we're supporting different organizations that are doing some of that work. One of the former inmates in our group is working as a director of a nonprofit now, and that particularly working on the first 2 weeks of a formerly incarcerated person's freedom, because that's one of the most sensitive times for people coming out of prison, particularly if they've been there for decades. And so we're beginning to kind of work and try to find partners that are doing reentry work in terms of, case management type work. We're also looking to figure out how churches can partner with inmates coming out of prison so that they have a spiritual home. One of the interesting things that some of the prisoners will tell us when they go to church outside is that it's just not quite the same.
Sure. So before we leave here, I wanted to ask you. Okay. Can you all hear?
What do I do for myself?
So how does she take, so she hears Peggy takes on so much pain of those who she serves at Angola. How does she take care of herself from receiving so much of that?
Well, I just have to off. For a bit of respite, the whole, self-care things that you have to do. But there is a way in which you don't ever leave it. You bear it. It's just part of the job.
There's a lot of stories in this room that can resonate and find a relationship with the stories you've been hearing today. And I'm just really curious if, before we leave, anyone has something that's been on their heart that really resonates with the work that you're out there doing, where God is calling you, and what you heard from Maria, Peggy, from all the different presenters we've had today, that you'd be willing to share just in these final minutes that we have here today. From your own personal story, your own personal walk. Samara, do you want me to say I'll wait? Yeah, you want something? Okay. Here we go.
Am I too close? So, just with Peggy, as Peggy is doing ministry within the context of the prison, I do a lot of ministry in the context of the Juvenile Detention Center in Atlanta. And as she said, you always take it home. You always try to figure out what can you do to help in mass incarceration? What can you do to help just allow Christ to be present, allow Christ to use you, and allow for it to be acceptable. So, and then at the same time, I heard the question about self-care. The only way is to take a break, because you're always there. You always are driven to go back, because you want to make sure that there is a multitude of people coming in and different doctrines, different theologies. Everything is always different. And you want what you have to be what they desire, and it's not always the case. And so, it's so much work. It's so much on one person, and you hear the stories, and the stories are heartbreaking, but it's always there. I know for me, last year, every young woman I met had been sexually abused, raped, molested, some of them as early as the age of 7. One young lady at the age of 9 had contracted a sexually transmitted disease from her uncle. Another young lady had 5 people in her family, all who had raped her over a period of her life. One young lady had got there, and as up to 2 weeks had just been molested. So there is no way to not have a heavy burden with doing this work. And all of them are primarily people of color. So, and I also work with human trafficking and dealing with victims who are trying to get out of the sex trafficking industry, a lot of them who just don't have families. So it is the best pastoral care, or best self-care is for you to receive counseling as a counselor, because you have to get rid of some of this, and you have to be able to express what you're going through. So that'll be just my story. I have a little tidbit, but I'm in common ground too. So working with homeless now is just a lot of different stuff. But anyway.
Yeah, a lot. So, thank you very much. So, for the interest of time, I think we will be moving into prayer to bring in the Holy Spirit to help with our own self-care and love. And before that, we'll have Jamie and Sam come up. But another round of applause for all of our presenters, but especially for Peggy and Maria. Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much. Thank you.